Hello and welcome back, everyone. At Sanctuaries of Learning, we believe all students deserve to feel seen, challenged, and supported, including those who show high levels of ability or performance. Now, more and more schools have been asking me for support around this area, especially in light of the department's focus on high potential and gifted education policy. There's a strong system push, but also a real desire among school leaders and teachers to move beyond compliance and towards practices that genuinely stretch our students and support our high-performing students. So in this issue, we're diving into what it really means to differentiate for high-performing students in ways that are rigorous, sustainable, and deeply rooted in inclusive practice. So joining us for this conversation, I have three educators who live this work every day. First up, we have Dr. Barbara Blackburn, who we're so grateful to have with us. She is a renowned education consultant, author, speaker, and known for her expertise in student growth, professional development, and raising the level of rigor in education. Barbara is the rigor lady, and she's bringing rigor down under, as we said before our interview. Our former teacher, principal, and university professor, Barbara, has written over 30 books, I'm sure it's more than that now, of teaching and leadership that are widely used in schools around the world. So welcome, Barb. Give us a wave.
Hello and welcome to y'all too. Now you know I'm from the South in the United States as soon as I say y'all.
Y'all, yes. We also have Lee Englefield, who is the principal of Wanji Wanji Public School in Lake Macquarie, with over 26 years in education across large metropolitan and regional settings. He has worked as a teacher, assistant principal, deputy, and also served as a literacy and numeracy strategy advisor, leading statewide professional learning and strategic support for schools focused on best practice, the learning progressions, and Plan 2. So welcome, Lee. Happy to have you here.
Thanks, Steph, for that very warm introduction.
Interruption.
Interruption. It could be that. Let's see how we go.
And Hannah Bullivant, is that correct? Hannah, yeah. And she's the assistant principal curriculum and instruction at Wanji Wanji Public School. She's worked across a number of primary schools in the Hunter, Newcastle, and Lake Macquarie regions during her 11 years with the department. Driven by the values of clarity, intentionality, and consistency, she supports her staff to embody these drivers so that they can be the best for their students. So welcome, team. So happy to have you. All right, let's start. Barbara, I'd love to ask you. Now, some people think rigor just means giving more work or harder work to students. How do you define rigor, and what misconceptions should we be aware of when differentiating for our high-performing students?
Well, I think the biggest misconception you've just stated, which is that rigor is more. I find that people think doubling the amount of work is how you increase the rigor, and that's not really it at all. In fact, rigor is expecting students to learn at high levels, supporting them so they can learn at high levels, and then they demonstrate learning at high levels. And again, one of the things that I find is that people have so many misconceptions, they don't really get to the heart of what rigor is. So I'll have people say, but rigor's not for year one students. Yes, primary students can do rigor. Well, it's not for students with special needs. Yes, it is. They can absolutely do it with the right support. So it's more about believing and implementing that each student can start where they are, but that you can take them to this new higher place. And I'll tell you one of the other real misconceptions that I see specifically with high achieving students is that oftentimes those students are challenged creatively, but they are not challenged academically. So they may do this massive creative project. I saw one the other day. It was a great creative project with technology and all kinds of things. But what the students were doing was reading and summarizing, and that's not rigorous.
Interesting. Okay, and Lee and Hannah, I would love to know from your perspective, what beliefs have you worked to shift in your school about what high-performing students need?
Well, to add on to what Barbara said and what Barbara mentioned there really resonated with our approaches here that, like, particularly for our HPG students, our high potential and gifted students, it's not about more of the same. It's actually about different. It's about us understanding what their gifted traits and characteristics are, or where their potential lies. So it's not more, it's different. It's new learning. It's really about expanding their current understanding to move them on to higher levels of learning. Recently, I read an article. I can't remember who it was from, and I've used this line with staff in my recent communication, and even during instructional rounds, that our HPG students deserve as much attention as our lower achieving students. At the statistics that have been shared through the department regarding the dropout rates of our high potential and gifted students as they're going on into their secondary schooling years is quite high. It's quite astronomical. And we need to do different. We need to do better for those students, but we also need to make sure that we've got our eyes and ears open for potential all the time, and have that in our mind. So in terms of the work that we've done here at school, it has been having HPG on our agenda, but it's also carefully considered in our explicit planning and programming in our teaching, which is where Hannah comes in, where we have taken what has been considered a mathematical lens regarding creating extending prompts for our students, but starting to use that terminology in our planning, through our questioning, through our daily reviews, so that it is rigorous in terms of all of our students having access to these extension opportunities that are part of the curriculum. It's not just an extra. It's not more of the same. Hannah, did you want to talk about what we've done with staff in that extending prompt space?
So I suppose adding on to what Lee and Barbara have said, we have changed beliefs by educating our staff on what high potential and gifted learners can look like, also what their behaviours can look like, and then how we can cater for those in the classroom. My job is to make sure that every classroom has opportunities for all students to have high expectations, and then to further themselves even more, I suppose, than what teachers would expect them to be able to achieve. So not having separate learning intentions and success criteria for students that aren't achieving at that level, but giving them leveraging or enabling prompts to be able to access that the same as the whole class. We have a lot of systems in place to do with growth mindset and learning mindsets. So all of our students embrace challenge, and we reward that and praise that. It's a part of our whole school values as well. So we always say, have you got a crunchy eyebrows or a sweaty brain? And our motto here, our school colour is red, and we say we have a red hot go. So to encourage students to achieve those high expectations in the classroom, we're constantly rewarding and supporting that, and then sharing that with our community when they're doing that.
I really appreciate the whole school language you're really developing around this. It sounds like, again, it's part of one of your strengths, which is building this culture around, catering for our high performing students, and how that actually supports all of our students really in the long term. I'm really curious. Yeah, go Lee.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, to add on to what Hannah said as well, and again, this is something that I communicate with staff, that we scaffold up the curriculum. We don't level down. If we've got a deficit model for our students, they will always be, in terms of groups or leveling, the wombats will be the wombats, the emus will be the emus, and our understanding of student learning needs to be more fluid, that our students can move up and down, left and right, depending on where their talents and their abilities are currently lying. And that's up to us in those minute-by-minute decisions that we're making when our teachers are driving their teaching and learning programs, when they're driving that curriculum, where they've got their eyes and ears open during those lessons, asking the right hinge questions, asking the right questions throughout when they're checking for understanding with their students, to get that constant pulse check. And that's hard work. I've recently heard one of our executive directors talk about this recently. Teaching and learning isn't magic. It's hard work when you're in front of those kids. The magic is the planning and the foresight into what we're doing with our students before we enter the classroom. And if we're well geared for that, which is what Hannah will elaborate on in terms of the structures that we've got here at our school to support our teachers, that's when that teaching and learning program can be brought to life for all of our students.
You're doing amazing things at Wanji, and that's why I've asked you to share today. What I'd love to kind of ask all three of you is, it's a bit off script, but when people say they have high expectations of students, it can be really different, like your example, Barbara, earlier, to what we see in the classroom. High level questions may be planned, but then low level answers are, received and accepted by the teacher. I really want to know, how do we help teachers shift these beliefs around their expectations of kids? They may say they have high expectations, but their actions actually don't show that.
And I'm sure y'all have done this to make the shift that you're talking about. What I see in schools is that too often, not in every case, but too often, teachers will tell me they have high expectations, but then when I watch them, they don't. And it's everything from, dumbing down what we're asking students to do to accepting less. And one of the things that drives me crazy is when we use language to reflect our expectations in ways that are not positive. So, for example, when we say, we're in the workroom and we say, "Oh, Jeffrey isn't doing well today," but I don't know that surprises me because honestly, his brother was so much smarter than he was. Or, I don't know why I should be surprised about this because she's just a special needs student. Or, and this one is my favorite down here in the South in the US. Somebody goes, she's doing the best she can, bless her heart. And bless her heart is not said nicely. Okay. I'm just going to tell you, it really means I'm just going to write her off. And as a teacher, I remember doing that with some students, not expecting much of them. And so I think we have to start with our thinking and our language because it really does make a difference. One of the recommendations I make to school leaders is that whenever there is a meeting, whether it's whole faculty or a team or a department or a grade level, that they start by having people go around and say something positive about a student. Because too often what happens is they start with, "You're not going to believe what happened to me today in my classroom." And then it just goes from there. And that's not effective. And when we start with our language, then we start to believe they can do more. Therefore, we start to ask them to do more. And then we really do have to have a clear criteria of what rigor looks like. When I partner with schools, I have a rubric that I give them. And so it's very specific as to what is just developing and what is rigorous. And most folks are very surprised because what they think is rigorous is actually developing. And to have that very clear criteria and be able to measure against it. And one of the things I do with schools is teachers will work together to craft or revise a task based on the rubric. And then I will review them and give feedback. And what I find over and over again is that it's not as rigorous as you think it is. And that most of what we're doing with our high performing students is what we ought to be doing with our standard students. And we need to be bumping it up with our gifted students. And we're not doing it.
Thank you. And I love that we're starting to talk about the next part of our interview, which is what are some practical ways we can support teachers to differentiate their instruction for our high performing students while still managing the needs of the whole class. Because I do find teachers think they have to create a whole new group or a whole new task or a whole new lesson so that they can cater for these students. What are your thoughts on that, Barb or Lee and Hannah? What has helped your staff?
Why don't you let them go first since I just talked?
Okay.
One example that we worked on last year. So we've really dug our heels into our mathematics curriculum here at Wanji. It was in song with what was happening across the state with the release of some new syllabus documents. So there's been a curriculum reform across New South Wales here, Barb. And we took a theory called the tip of the iceberg theory, where we actually looked at the most formal representations of mathematical learning for each stage. So when we looked at, for example, the most formal representation of place value of addition and subtraction for year 1 and year 2, what does our syllabus say? and then what is the underlying components to actually get our students to that most formal representation. So we actually spent quite a period of time developing our curriculum knowledge, our rigor around our curriculum expectations and the stepping stones, the milestones to get our students there. But then what that led to in terms of mathematics was also what Steph has referred to, and I know we certainly do here, is our horizontal knowledge. What is beyond that formal expectation for year one? What is the next stepping stone? So what that led to was a deep focus on curriculum knowledge, getting our depth of understanding as a team. It actually led to our teachers creating differentiated learning intentions and success criteria. This is where I want to get all of you to, but this is where we want to push beyond within our individual lessons and our individual structures. It led our teachers to ensuring that they were creating parallel learning tasks for students to actually consider where they were at in terms of challenging themselves. It also led to some more work around what we were doing in mathematics regarding rich and challenging tasks for all students, with extending prompts to push those students beyond their level of understanding, but also to develop enabling prompts to give our lower achieving students access to those same rich tasks. They're not just special ones that we do on a Friday afternoon for a group of the gazelles. It's actually for all of our students, so we can all be on the same conversation, so that we're truly developing that mindset of a community of learners, that all of our ideas are worth sharing and all of our attempts are worth celebrating. Hannah, did you want to add on what it looks like on the ground?
So when we first looked at differentiation as one of our areas to improve across the school, we had a big discussion about it, and I said to Lee, I believe it's teachers' pedagogical content knowledge. So it's not necessarily their lack of content knowledge or their lack of pedagogy, but combining them together to deliver the best experience for the students in front of them. And to, on top of what Lee has said, using the theory of the iceberg model and building their confidence and knowledge, we also, when we were planning tasks for the class, we were doing them ourselves and seeing the difference that even each of the adults in the room were coming up with different strategies and different, efficient answers. And then we were saying, well, if we here in this small space have such a variety of knowledge and answers, then we need to predict that in our classroom and then leverage that and support them. And as you said before, Steph, when you're getting those low level answers, we're working on, okay, how do we then take that to a higher order answer and then push them further, push their learning along with intrinsic motivation, not just because they're trying to impress their teacher or they're rewarded. They're wanting to do that on their own. And by establishing that problem solving culture and working on that productive struggle and allowing students to have that productive struggle, that time to struggle themselves with us, without us teachers trying to come in and save them all of the time, is really, really worked in our setting. Our teachers were very uncomfortable with that at first, but now we've developed their content knowledge, their pedagogical knowledge, and then their teaching approaches. We can find that they are catering for a lot of students with higher ability, and they're actually identifying students with potential that they weren't identifying before.
You've also jogged my memory there as well, and we'll go through our process of the work that we've done around building our staff skill set with our Wanji way of doing things here. But one of the most underutilized talk moves is, so we implemented talk moves here at our school. It was initially focused on mathematics, but now it's for all areas of the curriculum. So we have full participation of all of our students all of the time using nonverbal gestures. We actively promote a hands down classroom wherever humanly possible. But one of the most powerful things that we do for all of our learners with a mathematical lens is give them time to revise their thinking, that all powerful final question. Has anyone's thinking changed based on what they've heard? Because if you hear a better idea, you've actually got a responsibility to embrace that idea, whatever and whoever has stated that idea. And that's celebrated here. Like our use of quality talk routines isn't just limited to talk moves, but it expands across what we've done with quality literature, with a pedagogical approach called questioning the author that I know Hannah can talk about extensively. It's taken time to support our teachers with these approaches, but yeah, we're on the course. We've still got work to do, as all schools do, but it has been a shift in teachers' mindsets and approaches.
Well, I want to take what Lee said about math and give a really practical, just down and dirty kind of example. One of the things that is really important in terms of a math skill is that students not just do computational math and not just do a word problem, which may still be computational. And a lot of times, what we do with our high performers is we have them write their own word problems. Well, again, if I'm doing 2 + 2 = 4, and then they write a problem that says Sally has 2 dogs and Steffi has 1 cat, how many pets do they have in total? It's still computational math. It's basic rote memorization. So where you want to go to in math, in terms of rigor, is the notion of recognizing and explaining misconceptions. So that means that once students have learned something, then you give them 3 problems that are already solved. And they have to determine which one is not correct, explain why it's not correct, solve it correctly, and explain why it's correct now. And I will immediately have people on the other end of the spectrum say to me, oh, but my special needs students could not do that. They absolutely can. They just need extra modeling, and you give them 2 to choose from. So you're going to narrow their choices a little bit. But here's what you're going to do with the high performing and gifted students. I'm going to give them 4 to choose from, and I'm not going to tell them how many are incorrect. And they have to figure out how many are incorrect and then do the same process. But I can have everybody work on a rigorous skill in a way that best suits their needs, and in a way that if I'm a teacher in a classroom, that's very manageable. That is not something that I'm having to stop and teach X number of different lessons. That is something that I can absolutely do with all my students. Does that make sense, Stephanie?
Oh, yes, I love it. And I'm from our conversation already, I'm getting so many ideas for a maths lesson. I'm actually co-teaching this afternoon after this interview. So thank you, all of you. Yes, these are all such practical ways. I love that we keep coming back to workload and making sure that we're not adding to our teachers' impossible lists of things to do. We're just thinking about little tweaks we can make, reframing what we're doing so that we're actually catering to all our kids, but we're not doing anything, we're not adding anything on really. So I really appreciate that about our conversation. I think it would be great, Lee and Hannah, if we could share maybe your iceberg model framework with the people who are the schools that are interested, if that's okay. Maybe your talk moves, if you have a resource or poster, that would benefit all of us in our primary schools and high schools, I think. And I think, Barbara, I'd love to include your task as well as a resource, your idea about offering different problems.
I think I have it written up, so I will get that to you.
And Barbara's books are what I love about Barbara's books is they are so practical. You kind of just need a break from reading them because you are filled with so many ideas. She has so many scaffolds and so many ideas that your brain starts to fill up very quickly. So if you want practical, I will mention the titles of her book at the end of our conversation. But yeah, get into those. I want to ask you, Barb, what systems or habits can leaders put in place to make differentiated practice sustainable?
I think the best thing that leaders can do, and y'all will have to tell me if you agree with me on this, but I really think something that's very important is to reinforce what is working. I think sometimes we're so focused on what isn't working that we don't focus on what is working. So, for example, my favorite leadership strategy is called name it, claim it, and explain it. And what happens is when you're out in the building, you see somebody doing something great. Don't pick your high flying teacher. Find somebody that's just good middle of the road or a struggling teacher who's doing something right. Take a picture or take a video. And then now you're going to warn the teacher you're going to do this, okay? Because otherwise they'll freak out a little bit. So don't mess with that too much, okay? Make sure you tell them you're going to do this. At your next faculty meeting, you start your meeting not with an agenda or even a welcome. You start with what you see up on the screen is an example of best practice. This is what we are trying to do in our school, and this person is doing it. So whoever it belongs to, I want you to name it and claim it as yours, and then explain it to the rest of us. And I've also had people do that just via email, where they send out an email to everybody, a school-wide email, same thing, and the person has to hit reply all and explain it. But again, you got to warn them, because otherwise they're sort of off their game when you're wanting to stand up and explain something. So always make sure you tell them you're going to do it. And again, you're celebrating what's right. And the more we celebrate the good, then the more it sticks in terms of sustainability.
Oh, I love that. And I have taken that from you, Barbara, and used it at rounds. And I did warn the person beforehand so they weren't in shock. And it's something that I also continue to do after rounds. I sometimes send a beyond the round email when someone has tried something in their classroom. I send the photo with a bit of an explanation of, what they've done and the impact of the kids to show the network, the learning doesn't stop after the 2-day round. It's about what actually happens in the classroom for our kids. And so I love the focus on what's working well and from everyone, not just the super passionate go-getters, but the people who are just giving it a crack. So such a great routine for all of us. And I think I could see this happening in a classroom with students as well. If we're focusing on reasoning and communicating their strategies, why not spotlight kids and share, look what Timmy's doing. What do we notice? What can we learn from him? So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
I love it with teachers as well, but I will tell you the one I love even more, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to give you one more idea, is called Marvelous Misconceptions. And this is particularly helpful in a math classroom, but it works in any classroom. You see a student who's doing something incorrectly, and then they work with other students and with you to figure out how to do it correctly. And then they get up and say, this is what I did that was not correct, and this is how I came to the correct answer. And they get to post it on their Marvelous Misconceptions board in the classroom, and everybody cheers when somebody gets to post something. So I love that, really, for students.
Oh,
So
yes.
I'll give you one idea, but I love that one.
That reminds me of from a teacher-led perspective that my favourite no routine, where the teacher finds their favourite misconception or error and then actually highlights why through an explicit lesson for what the child has taken on board and what the next steps in their learning might be. I've actually used that myself a couple of times.
So powerful. Imagine the culture that you build and the messaging for your students about what learning really is about. It's about shifting and learning from our mistakes and learning that other people have better ideas than yours and embracing that. Like you said, Lee, it's our responsibility. If someone has a better idea than you, then awesome. So Lee and Hannah, what leadership moves have you made that have supported this work taking root across your school?
But there's a couple of things. The first one, I guess, from a systems leadership side of things, is actually prioritizing time for teachers to work with a knowledgeable other like Hannah. Before curriculum reform time here, in terms of state expectations with additional time for teachers, we've had additional time provisions for our teachers to work with Hannah as an APCI since she started here in 2022. And that investment in time, that investment in giving teachers the opportunities to self-identify what their problem of practice is, or for teachers to with Hannah's support, to self-identify what their problem of practice is with certain initiatives that we've been trying to implement as a whole school. So we've been very mindful in the way we've established Hannah's role for success through time, through resourcing, but also our professional learning. So, I've certainly sat through professional learning in my career where it's been a one-hit wonder. Yeah, here's this great idea. Now go and do X, and it falls to mush because there isn't any, and I hate to use this term here, Barb, but I will. There hasn't been any rigor behind the implementation. There hasn't been any support or foresight into, well, how are we actually going to support this teacher, this team, our school, to get beyond the process of this is a great idea, to actually it having an impact in the classroom. So we've invested using school funds in that, and we still provide teachers above establishment expectations. Our teachers get 10 hours of curriculum reform time a term, so a 1 hour meeting with Hannah once a week. That is real, it's authentic. The other thing that we've established here, and I was fortunate that this was burgeoning before I arrived here, is that there's a culture of open classrooms. You mentioned there before that I get into the classroom and teach. Sometimes I say to staff that I'll just pop in, and sometimes I like to think I value add to a lesson as the teachers in the moment. Sometimes I don't add as much value as what I'd like to add, but our doors are open. And that has certainly made Hannah's life easier in terms of that collegial approach, that approach that, hey, we will work on this together. We will come up with a shared solution to empower teachers. We've also established school-wide programming tools and support. So we've mentioned there before about extending prompts being an expectation, being a norm. And that's actually been planned for very carefully in Hannah's role, where the co-planning, co-implementation, co-evaluation cycles, we've actually got the documentation to support that across the English and maths curriculum. So that's definitely been a big win for teachers. And then as time's gone on with the statewide approach, and Hannah will add in here, we've actually had HPG on teachers' minds through establishing a committee, through additional professional learning and support. So we've constantly got that lens on seeking and having our eyes and ears open for potential in our students consistently.
And I think we made a big shift on what we should do to what we could do. So we look at our programs, look at the opportunities that we are offering our students, and do things like look at the type of task like Barb referred to before and say, is there a better type of task that could provide this opportunity for all students? Are they only closed-ended tasks? Are they open-ended? Are they actually catering to the explicit learning that you're teaching? Or is it just a routine task that you know? And is it eliciting the right information? So we really stripped things back and we thought, what do we want to see in the kids? What do you want to see in the teachers? And how are we going to get there? And we made that extremely clear, our vision. We have a big consensus on our vision as well. And then we just keep showing teachers what they're doing well, but how could we possibly cater for this student better or cater for this group of people better? So a lot of the work that I do in that co-teaching cycle is we sit down, we will go through programs, we might forward program together, and then we'll think, okay, is this an explicit concept or skill, or is this an applicable strategy we can use in different contexts? And then what's the most appropriate task to allow? First of all, what's the most appropriate instructional strategy? And then what's the most applicable task to allow all students to access this? We're working smarter, not harder. And in the teaching profession, sometimes you get overwhelmed and default to what you know or resources that you know. And we want to be more efficient in choosing those and gaining that time back in the curriculum that we seem to have that limited time in.
I'm hearing meaningful reflection and meaningful collaboration and looking at things from a student's perspective. What do we expect our students to be doing and saying? Like we talk a lot about in rounds, and I can see that really coming through in the way that you are supporting your teachers, especially you, Hannah, in the classrooms to do that powerful work. So I want to celebrate you and your hard work, and Lee, for you supporting what Hannah's doing, working alongside the teachers to co-plan and get in there and actually look at what are the students' needs. Now, Bob,
Steffi, I think
yes,
it's really important to point out that what they've done could not have happened without their leadership. And one critical piece of it was just they believed in what was going on, and they modeled it, and they prioritized time and resources to make it happen. And that message comes through to teachers. And so I think that you cannot underestimate the personal role each leader plays.
Yeah, it's picking and sticking with things. Like it's not the shotgun approach and hope something lands. It's not throwing a dart at a dartboard and hoping you hit a bullseye. It's no, we need to dig our heels in, and this, to get to the point that we're at, has really taken time to get to the point where we're actually been making the right decisions based on what our kids need first and foremost, but also what our teachers need to enhance their practices. And I do use that word enhance very carefully. It isn't about improvement, because I'm very fortunate that all of my teachers are quality educators. They are passionate educators. They believe that they are making a difference and can make a difference to kids' lives each and every day. But it's about tweaks and adjustments and choosing the right things, choosing the right, I guess, systems and processes with our expectations and our engagement norms that Hannah can talk about, that have actually created this environment where learning's at the fore, where kids are developing an understanding gradually, and through our communication with them, that learning is about hard thinking. It's about thinking. It's less about the doing. It's more about the thinking. And that's our next piece of work that we're working with our kids with their understanding of the learning process, that it's sweaty eyebrows, crunchy eyebrows, sweaty eyebrows. You might get sweaty eyebrows if you get crunchy eyebrows because the sweat's dripping down. But it's actually like it's hard work, and we want you thinking if it's easy, you're not learning. It's not problematic enough for you. It's a exercise in practice. But if it's hard, it's worth learning. It's worth understanding. It's worth pushing through to get to the other end. And that's something that culturally that we've worked hard to develop here.
And I think our whole leadership team are on class at some point during the week. So I've been on class this term. Another AP is on class full time, another one's one day, and Lee jumps in and out a couple of times a week. So we can be vulnerable and try these new practices and try the research and see what's going to work and what's not going to work. And then do our quality checks before we then ask teachers to do that. And they can see the vulnerability in us taking upon these changes, and they know that we're in it with them and we're doing it together. And I think that's a really big shift in, our leadership at this school.
Yeah, and I love it. And I've definitely witnessed that myself working with your team for a little bit over the past year and a bit. I can definitely see all of your efforts shining and the shifts in your team and your teachers. So, Barbara, this is the question I always ask researchers, and it's when we put differentiating for high performing students on our school improvement plans, or school excellence plans they're now called in New South Wales, how can we as teachers and leaders tell if our differentiation efforts are actually working for our high performing students?
I look at two things. I look at what students are doing, but more importantly, and this is really the number one thing that I look at, is the tasks or the assignments or the assessments, whatever that is, the tasks that they are being asked to do. I can look at a task and very quickly determine if it's rigorous or not. Again, I use the rubric, but there are some key things that I really pay attention to. You talked about pushing students beyond the text. They have to really go to that horizon. That's a really important piece. A lot of people don't do that. And so I really want to look at what kinds of things are happening. Is it truly rigorous, or is it just a lot of stuff? Again, I see a lot of really cool projects that are neat, and parents like them because they're structured and they take a long time and they count for a big part of the grade, but they're not rigorous. And so what I look at is what expectations are being reflected in terms of what they're being asked to do. And the most concrete way you can do that is through a task or an assignment. And then look at what are the students actually doing. Are they doing that task at that level, or are they, as you said earlier, being asked a higher level question and answering a low level answer? That's not what you're looking for. But those two are my keys.
I love that you're focusing on what students are doing in the classroom and then the task, because I think sometimes teachers can feel like personally attacked when we just look at their pedagogy and their practice, but looking at the students' work, looking at the tasks they're engaging in, can really shift conversations to be around what is the impact of what we're doing on our students, and how can the task really affect the way they are engaging with this higher, levels of learning. So thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Barb. Lee and Hannah, I want you to name it, claim it, and explain it. What has been the impact of this work at your school on your students, the teachers, classroom culture? What have you noticed?
Positivity would probably be the overarching term, and kids believing that they can do the work. When we started here, there was a lot of, I can't do it, I don't get it, I don't understand it. And through our work on culture, belief, our ongoing work on developing a problem-solving mindset in our students, one of our terms is like, oh, you can't do it yet. And that belief that there's always scope for improvement, always scope for new learning, is vital. In terms of that positivity and that belief, our kids are happy, our teachers are happy, our community happy. And the one metric that I can share with that is we do not have an attendance issue here at our school. We sit above state and similar schools' expectations substantially, so much so that our school does not require an attendance target. Our kids are happy to come to school. When they are away, they are genuinely unwell. So for me, that's the biggest thing. Our kids are happy to learn. Our kids are happy to engage. Our staff are engaged and motivated in what they are doing daily. The hallway conversations that are often the unofficial metric are positive and rich, with teachers sharing practice. It's not having a whinge around the staff room table. It's sharing achievements of things that they've been doing in the classroom, their hopes and their aspirations for new lessons. And you can't put a measure on that. It's the climate. And we know that that's the case because when we get casual teachers coming into our school, they tell us that. They share that with us. And we've worked hard. We've worked really hard. The data is in terms of standardized assessments. That is the unfortunate nature of the business. We're getting results there. Our NAPLAN results are sitting very strongly above similar schools and above state in many of the domains. One of the things I'm probably most proudest of is our adaptation of our approaches to teaching reading in the early years before it became a mandatory approach using decodable text and a phonics-based approach. We were already achieving those things because we knew that our kids needed it, and our results are showing us that. We're really proud of what we're doing, and we are an amazing place to be.
And I have a lot of kids on the playground come and ask me for extension in their learning. So I champion spelling across the school, for example, and I've got kids in year 5 and 6 saying, oh, miss, I know a 14 phoneme word. Can I spell it for you? This is the background. This is the etymology. Or I remember you gave me a challenge spelling word. I still don't know the answer to that. Can you give me one more clue? So I'm just on playground duty and kids are coming and asking for extension and challenge from me in an informal setting. So they're the moments where I think, well, this is really working and our kids are really enjoying that challenge and they're investing and driving in their learning, not just participating.
Thank you so much, everyone. I've just reflected now, and I see that differentiating for high-performing students isn't just about giving them more work. It's actually about truly believing in our students and what they're capable of, providing appropriate levels of challenge and support at the right time. And as Barbara, Lee, and Hannah have shown, it starts with belief shifts, clear systems, collaboration, as well as intentional and responsive teaching. When we design learning that stretches our students' thinking and values deep reasoning, we create classrooms where high-performing students are extended, supported, and are able to grow in meaningful ways. Now, if you're looking for practical next steps, I am going to, Lee and Hannah are going to share with me their resources to share with you, aren't you? Their iceberg, their talk moves, and other things. Barbara Blackburn's books are a great place to start as well. So she has Scaffolding for Success, helping learners meet rigorous expectations across the curriculum. And like I said, it's packed with many ready-to-use strategies that even stretched my thinking. And her newly released 4th edition of Rigor is Not a 4-Letter Word offers even more tools for raising expectations while supporting every learner. So please check those out. Thank you so much for watching. And please contact us if you have any questions or would like to collaborate. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you.